If you remember from the beginning of the course, the premise of the game is that the hero is skating around the rink, leaving a pattern, is restricted within the boundaries of this rink, can jump to different points of the rink, and on top of it, can be customized to a specified avatar, which will change several settings about the character. In this lesson, you will probably have the most amount of creative license in arranging some of these assets, but there will be, of course, technical restrictions and design restrictions. But you are welcome to change some of these things so they'll maybe look a little bit more to your liking. As you can see, I've switched my layout back to default from our previous mechanism. This will be more optimal for designing the level. And our list of goods is here in the art directory, so go ahead and open that up. We're going to be dragging in a few things here, which are going to be in the modals folder. Let's open that up as well. And the first one we're going to import is the rink and the rink border. So let's look at the model settings up here for each one. Click in the rink, and let's give a brief overview of what exactly we're seeing up here. As I've stated before, the scale factor for importation of assets in FBX format always imports as 100ths. Here I've changed it to 1. Collada will actually import exactly as 1. Mesh compression here is off, and if you do choose it to on, it will reduce the size of the mesh but might introduce some oddities. If you are changing the mesh itself procedurally through code, then you would want to change this value, read-write enabled. Optimize mesh here is not the same as mesh compression, and it will order the triangles of the mesh in a certain order. Blend shapes, also known as morph targets, are something that is most commonly used to, for example, to connote expression of a character, so going from a smile to a frown, something that is a little bit more sophisticated than just regular rigging. So generation of colliders we do not want in this case, because generation of colliders will create a mesh collider for the object that you are creating. This will be extremely expensive for this model and certainly not suited for the mobile platform, but it is suitable, for example, terrain. If there are rolling hills in which our character is skating on, we would want those hills to be smooth and not created out of a bunch of boxes or capsule shapes. We would want them to fit the mesh. So in this case, if you are importing a terrain, then you probably would want to change this setting. So these two settings are actually pretty related, swap UVs and generate light map UVs. If you have multiple UV maps, then, and if you want to dedicate one of those to UVs, and Unity is picking up the wrong UV channel, then you would want to check this option. If this doesn't make any sense to you, we'll look at it a little bit more in the future once we get to light mapping. Normals we have already covered. It is what determines a smoothing angle of a certain mesh. If you choose import, it will import it from a 3D package. If you choose calculate, you can specify what will be the maximum angle for smoothing of the mesh. Back to import. Tangents here is also has to do with UVs. It will determine how tangents and binormals should be calculated. This we have already covered. Import materials, definitely check that. By base texture name, you might still have issues, so this is why I'm having a prefab and we're not just dragging in the model, because sometimes matching things to textures, materials often don't import properly, and you might run into some issues. So because we're importing the rink and we're not working with the hero model, if you go into the rig, we haven't actually changed any settings, so I'm going to click revert. We will see animation type none. This refers to the rig. This is not referring to, well, animation type. what it means is rig type, really. There are several here. Legacy is just a non-mechanism rig. Generic is a normal rig. Humanoid is a rig which will have more fancy options, such as, for example, mapping other animations onto the model, or remapping animations from one model to another. So if you've got several animations, you can actually use the same animation to map from one character to another one, like you would with mocap. So that's pretty cool. Not necessary in our case. We want to keep it simple. Animations, we've already went into that category. So we're going to be rather androcentric in this case, and because of this, we're going to be selecting both the rink and the rink border, and we're going to center their size around the character. We are selecting both of them simultaneously because we want to maintain the size between the border and the rink. And we don't necessarily, the reason that the meshes are split, because we might not want to apply the settings for both the rink and the border, and we might have some other calculations that we don't want these both to be on the same object. If we select both of them and we just drag them onto the scene, we will see that only the rink has imported, but what happened to the rink border? I don't know why this is, but this is just how the universe in Unity works. If you select two objects, two model objects, you want to drag them in, you have to drag them into the hierarchy and not into just the scene view. And there they are, the rink and the rink border. We select both of them, and we will scale them up. So press R, and give them a good size. Let's look at it from the top. Like I said, it doesn't have to replicate exactly what we had in the demo that I showed you earlier. And maybe a little bit bigger. Now, if you look at the settings up here, we actually see that there are two materials here. They've got wonderful names called unnamed, which means that we're going to have to set these manually and just go into the models field, or excuse me, not the models field, the materials category, and drag in both of these settings. One of them is going to be called rink. If we just drag them onto the category, we will see it applied, and also the rink border, and apply it to the rink border. We will need to specify a texture onto the rink. So if we go in the rink, we're going to take this texture. We're going to take this texture here and drag this onto the rink field. This is going to be a little bit too blue for me. I'm going to drag this a little bit here and turn it on white, like so. Okay. So now let's create the stones around the rink. So I'm actually going to bring in the same model as we used for the rink. This will allow us to maintain proportions. So go back to the models field and bring in rink once again. You can either bring this to the hierarchy or you can bring this directly into the scene. Scale this up. You can actually go back from default and switch force split, which will be there by default. And you can apply this like so. And from the bottom, I guess. And we're going to be selecting this rink, the second rink, and position it over our hero. Let's bring this here, like so. Scale this up so it'll be bigger than the rink. And bring it down a little so it will be below the rink itself. Let's see, as far as size goes, this is manageable. Yep, got a little too passionate. And that's pretty good. Let's go into default so we can get a little bit more real estate. Okay. Once again, we've got this wonderful material up here. Let's first of all rename this ground so we don't get confused. go back into the art folder, go into materials, and apply the ground material here. Right away we see that we have a few already a texture applied here. We have a normal map and we have a diffuse map of this sidewalk. Oh, and also notice that I've got a tiling option up here. Both of these are set to 4 because this texture is perfectly seamed. It will allow us to tile it as much as we like. Also on top of this, we'll also be adding lighting, in which we will later map on. Moving on, back into the models folder. Moving on, we're going to be dragging in these street lights. Just go ahead and grab them, move them. These are probably going to be a little bit too large of what we're looking for. And just go ahead and scale them down so you get more of a proportionate look. Where is our 4x4 split